Hey y'all, it's your girl, the real deal Lanita's Kiss Reaction Channel. Like, share, and subscribe. What's up, real deal? How y'all doing out there? I hope everybody having a wonderful day, being safe, thinking positive. Make sure you stay hydrated out there, not the heat. Okay? Do what you can do to stay, out there heat. Now you know the day, real deal. This is the liberation in the closing argument. YNW Melly's trial to convince whether he get the death penalty, he walk away. To me, I don't think the death. Well, with two young men was shot. So two men was killed, executional style, not a drive-by style. No, the drive-by don't happen the way it happens. So this trial is going to be very critical for YNW Melly. Okay, but I want my real deal to put over here in the chat what they think he's guilty or not guilty. Okay. All right, kill the music for me, DJ. We're going to listen to the trial. And it's very important that y'all listen, not talk, not do nothing else. Don't get distracted. Don't just want to hear what you want to hear, but just listen to what the closing argument is about. Okay, so we're going to turn it over and listen to what happened. Okay, prosecutor up talking now. Hold up, y'all. Let me get it together, okay?
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard an hour and 10 minutes of speculation. You've heard an hour and 10 minutes of asking the state to do something I'm not allowed. I'm not allowed to testify. I'm not a witness. So why the personal attacks on me? Why getting upset when there's a mistake that was caught? Just like defense counsel made a mistake and Ms. Liberty quickly brought it to his attention that he said the wrong person in the right exhibition. There's a reason why there are multiple layers in place, why there are piece after piece of evidence that shows this defendant did that. Let me start in the back seat of that Jeep. How do we know the defendant was the one there with that Apple iPhone, not that LG? Here's a pretty good clue. That's an Apple phone charger going to the back seat right there, not an LG. And also, ladies and gentlemen, you know that LG phone wasn't working on October 26th of 2018. Multiple witnesses testified that it was an inoperable cell phone. So let's be very clear on that. Let's talk about Adrian Davis, AD. Adrian Davis seems to be a part of this puzzle. Kind of looks like the other puzzle pieces, kind of looks like it might fit. But then when you put all the puzzle pieces together and you start looking and comparing it, you go, well, none of the other ones are bright red like that. It kind of sticks out like a red herring. Because that's what Adrian Davis is. So why would counsel ask me why I wouldn't call him? That assumes the witness is credible. That assumes the witness is telling the truth. That assumes that Adrian Davis's testimony is consistent with every other sworn statement, deposition, and trial testimony in this case. If the witness is not credible and doesn't agree with any other piece of evidence in the case, not going to call him. So, counsel is a very, very big deal about the key, right? And why changing cars if going to the same place? Well, here's a message from September of 2018 between Mr. Demons and Anthony Williams. Is the back door unlocked? Yeah. Well, it gets better. What about?
I don't know why they are
They
giving this
had Francois 100 tracks sitting over there in court, y'all, looking all worried. He in court too. Let me see, y'all. Hold on.
This board has the garage button. More than one way to get into a house. And even better. From Anthony Williams, October 3rd. I would have told AD to leave his key. This is all in the messages that are in evidence. So that is on page 248 of the conversations between Mr. Williams and Mr. Keenan. October 3rd, 2018. Tell AD to give you a key. Adrian Davis had a key. There's no question based on these messages. You're going to make the argument, know the evidence. Because that is clearly contrary to all of the evidence on that. So, that's that community phone everybody used on that. I agree that the 9807 phone is accurate. Because it doesn't have any emotions, feelings, can't be paid off, it can't be in any way, shape, or form changed. It is what it is. So, to make sure that you're clear on all the aspects of the jury instructions, and Ms. Smith is going to kind of turn that on. Does the witness's testimony agree with the other testimony or evidence in the case? Counsel wants you to look at each piece of evidence individually. The problem is, it's not an individual picture. It's a...
Hold on, you all. Let me show y'all this. Okay. On that point, view what they are talking about. I'm gonna let y'all see what they are talking about. Okay. Let me skip it to 457. Francois. I'm gonna let y'all see. Francois is in the. There he goes. In court also. And the part where they are talking about now is this piece. This piece is the piece that she is speaking about. Hold on, y'all. I'm sorry. Sorry. And then I'm going to take it off, okay? All right. Hold on 1 second, real deal. This is the piece of the puzzle, part of the puzzle she's speaking about.
The totality of the circumstances. Because if you look at each individual piece of evidence, what are the odds? Ask that question. What are the odds that Mr. Devins got into that back seat? That all the fatal shots came from that back seat? That they didn't go to his friend's house, Frito Bang? You saw the picture, it states 62. They're hanging out. What are the odds that each and every single piece of evidence is stacked up trying to implicate him? And let's be very clear. There are attacks on Detective Moretti on that. As saying he's trying to better himself or further himself. Detective Moretti testified he's a detective in the Homicide Bureau today, just as he was 5 years ago when this case occurred. To say that a man who spent 20 years in armed services in protection and furtherance of his country cares about publicity? There was no impeachment There was no articles or news things on that. No, Detective Moretti is here fighting on behalf of Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams, the two young men, kids, that were murdered. And let's be clear, calling someone a kid, anything like that, is a play on your sympathy. And ladies and gentlemen, you agreed when we sat down for jury selection that sympathy would not come into play. That you would look and base this on the facts and the evidence. And ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you, you have that. Let's talk about some of the suspects quickly. First of all, they bring up that Danny Polo mentions that and taught you that what does on a plate mean? So let's be clear, Danny Polo is good to tell you and teach you that term, but when he says fire, you're not supposed to believe him. Which is it? You either believe or disbelieve. Danny Polo is a detective with tons of experience in this particular area. He talked about listening to wiretaps, reading all of these communications. They were talking about that. It's very clear from the context. But so then let's look at that on the plate comment. When did that happen in those messages? February 6th of 2019. So not anywhere near the date of incident. Again, another red herring to try and say, oh, this doesn't fit. And ladies and gentlemen, having a motive does not equal guilt. Having a motive does not equal guilt. One singular online statement is not the same as having the reasons and the opportunity and the means to commit this crime. And the only person who had the opportunity, the reason, and the means is this defendant. So counsel kept saying the presumption of innocence. That's gone. Once the evidence is there as to each element of the offense, there is no longer a presumption of innocence. Again, in jury selection, we talked about that. If it's illegal to have a certain colored pen on a certain day in this courtroom. Silly example, but a good point. It doesn't matter what color my shoes were or what jacket I had on. It's the elements of the crime, and only as to the elements that the state has to prove. And it's only beyond a reasonable doubt. As we discussed, beyond a reasonable doubt is not all possible doubt. We talked about this. We discussed this at length. That as a juror, if you had 100% positivity as to what happened, you'd be up there on the witness stand. There will always be questions. That's why it's what the puzzle shows. If you believe, and I submit that you should, the evidence from the testimony and the witnesses in this case, there is no question as to what that picture shows. That this defendant committed 2 counts of first-degree murder. So, one of the things I want to make sure that you understand, ladies and gentlemen, is you will have the opportunity, because this has been many, many days. If you want to hear testimony read back to you, you're allowed. Don't get copies of the transcripts, but you can request any witness's testimony to be read back to you. Look at Adrian Davis's. Not once did he mention anything about a pee break. Never came up. If there was a reason, he could have testified to it. Where? When? No details. I can't even call him the one fact witness because what he's saying is not a fact. Because there is complete dispute as to what he's saying. So, counsel says that, Detective, now Sergeant Chris Williams, was brought in just to pin it on this guy. No, ladies and gentlemen. Look at your notes. Think back to his testimony. What did Sergeant Williams say? Prove or disprove it was a drive-by. Not who was holding the gun outside the car, how far away. There was no testimony as to that. The testimony was what happened inside the car, what happened outside the car. And if there's no dispute that a murder happened, two murders, why are the cross-examination on meaningless details? Why? Ask that. So, again, we've talked about the phones, and even defense counsel says the phones are reliable. They're that digital leash that we talked about, that you go back for when you forget it. And there's no evidence whatsoever that supports this, oh, the phone was left in the car theory. There's none. Phones don't send messages and walk 1,300 steps by themselves. There's no evidence whatsoever that anybody else got in that Jeep. What the evidence does show, the defendant was consistently in that Jeep, and that Jeep never stopped during that whole course of travel until it got to the edge of the Everglades. The edge of the Everglades, where there's no witnesses, where there's no cameras, where they can stage a crime scene to try and get away with murder. So, counsel talks about the verdict form. So, there are options on the verdict form. Including a lesser included offense. What does a lesser included offense mean? A lesser included offense is the smaller felonies that make up murder in the first degree. So in this case, the lesser included offense would be manslaughter. That, as you learn from reading the instructions, is without the premeditation. That is negligently playing with a firearm and shooting someone in the back of the head. That's not what you have in this case, ladies and gentlemen. You have a planned execution of Anthony Williams, and then the same as to Christopher Thomas. Reasonable doubt is just that. It has to be reasonable. It's not beyond all possible doubt. It is one that has to, you have a gut feeling that the defendant is guilty. You are not there on a search for doubt. That's not your job. You're to evaluate the evidence and determine whether or not the defendant is guilty in accord with the law. So, to go to that, and I'm stealing this from Mr. Howard's opening statement, jury service is not a group project. It is 12 individual opinions. So if you have been convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of first-degree murder, you don't have to acquiesce to a lesser. If one person is not following the law and is not upholding their jury service, one person saying not guilty, that doesn't mean that's a verdict of not guilty. Mr. Adelstein answered that question for one of y'all during jury selection when he was asking questions. If you have an abiding conviction of guilt, the only appropriate verdict in this case is guilty of first-degree murder on 2 times. So, discussing as to reasonable doubt. We talked about walking to work. Is it possible to walk here from Miramar if you live out there? Possible, but not reasonable. The simplest explanation that makes the most sense, that takes the fewest leaps, is that this defendant killed these 2 individuals. The why don't have to prove that, but I've given you options, and the evidence has given you options. So, with regards to Mr. Glass, counsel talked about him. If Mr. Demons is at the house that morning,
Objection.
Demons,
Right.
at the house that morning, and rode back with Travion Glass in that red Mitsubishi, why is Travion accusing him of doing it? Why is he saying in these messages, how would they ever think I did something like that? Why? If he was there and saw him there. So, defense counsel talked about Brendan Collins. But I want to make sure it's clear for ladies and gentlemen that there's two different types of information. Brendan Collins testified that those other location points can be corroborated with other information. Surveillance video, things like that. So he's saying he's not using them because he's just doing the timing of things. Not that they aren't reliable, not that they aren't accurate, just that that's not what he uses. That was his testimony. In addition, counsel was trying to say that no, things can be changed because of the signal strength and it's things in between the phone and the tower. No, that is on the phone side, not the network side. This is looking at what the network sees when Brendan Collins is testifying. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can go and you can compare the various evidence and the exhibits yourself. These will all be sent back with you as you deliberate. And you can look, for example, at the cash report, which is in evidence as State 65, right? This is the 772-713-9807 Demons phone. Well then, ladies and gentlemen, you can also look at what's been admitted into evidence as States 104. The drop pin. And don't take my word or the PowerPoint that I created to say that this works. Do it yourself. Line up the roads and see how everything overlays. Defense counsel says George Bello, his testimony is he can't give you an exact range or distance from them. And that is correct. He said that for a specific gun. However, it's different than what Sergeant Christopher Williams is doing. Because remember, George Bello is doing the internal ballistics of the gun, not the external, not the trajectories and the flight paths. That's not his area. That is separate and apart. Chris Williams is doing that aspect with the trajectories. In terms of all of the information from George Bello, there's still casings that match and projectiles that match on there. Counsel then argued that Kurt Rhodes goes back to the car to get DNA. No. As you heard, ladies and gentlemen, that DNA was collected October 26th of 2018. For the Montessori school, in the route and flying out, counsel says, oh, well, we didn't check traffic and weather. Then in the next breath, the argument was, well, it's 3 a.m. in the morning, there's nobody out. Just get out on the side of the road and beat. But there's no evidence to that. Look at Adrian Davis's statements. Look at his testimony. He never argued that. So for the search warrant on Jameson Francois, the 3 guns that are missing, the ones that all have the Glock backstrap, the Glock, all of that, you know those aren't involved. And to say that the defense argument that the state or the defense or the detective does not want to find those guns is contrary to all the testimony from Detective Wright. If he didn't want to find the guns, why is he doing search warrants at these locations? If he didn't want to find the murder weapon, why are they diving the C9 canal? Why are they diving the lake behind Frito Bank's house? Of course they're looking for them. When you're looking at saying, oh, he's a professional, ladies and gentlemen, the message was very clear where he missed a show to have his hair braided. He told his mom it's okay. Stop being all upset. To go through a trauma like that, to shoot a video on someone's cell phone, and watch the cell phone video. I'm not talking about the Facebook Live one. I'm talking about the professional. They're using a cell phone to shoot a music video. This investigation went on for 5 years. Every lead was followed. Every warrant was written, and then some. The only person every piece of evidence points to is this defendant. Ladies and gentlemen, the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt Jamel Demons has committed 2 counts of first-degree murder. Thank you.
Well, there you go, real deal. There you have it. That was the murder. That was the closing argument. The prosecutor, she demonstrated how YNW Melly unalive his best friend. Also in the court, you had Francois sitting out there in the audience, all nervous. The mom, you saw the motion of her mouth moving. That's her talking right there. She was shocked that the prosecutor was mentioning something that shocked her at that time. It is what it is. What y'all think, y'all? I'm going to play this portion right here for y'all. Hold on. I can't play the video, so I have to do it like this. Okay. Seeing the mama getting intense. There go Francois right there. And then they came up and they showed the mom right here. I don't think that mom liked that prosecutor. What's she talking about? She talking about y'all. That's what she talking about. So that's Melly's brother right there. So y'all tell me what y'all think about the closing argument. Y'all like, share, and subscribe. And we'll come back later and talk about it real deal. I'm out. Enjoy your day.